Today we're going to chat a little bit about the use of a computer-aided dispatch data set of lifeguard activities that comes from Newport Beach, California. To start off, I have no financial conflicts to disclose, although I do want to clarify that I do not work for the city of Newport Beach. I do work for an allied agency in California. So this project was spawned from kind of the loaded question on the screen: what do lifeguards do? And the lifeguards watching this presentation could probably quickly come up with a list of responsibilities or activities of what we think we do. And we could certainly stay up until the sun comes up tomorrow trading stories. But ocean lifeguards, at least in the United States, have largely failed to use data as a driver of progress in a way to improve service and training and drive operational practice and evolve the profession based on scientific evidence. What we do know about lifeguard activities is largely anecdotal and based or derived from counts and statistics. The counts, the way that they're currently collected, they're collected at the end of the day when lifeguard bodies are tired and they're hungry and they're sunburnt. And so in reality, a lot of these statistics are collected in a retrospective way. Even if it's just by a few hours, they're still subject to recall bias, they're subject to social desirability bias, and other kind of human elements that threaten the validity and reliability of such records. What this project is basically doing is taking advantage of a new system that the Newport Beach lifeguards have used that is collecting data in real time and in a very precise manner. Our goal is to take a closer look at this lifeguard data to find out what the evidence is saying about lifeguard activities and then try and figure out a way to practically improve service and save lives. Quick overview, we'll talk about the study location in Newport Beach and the Newport Beach lifeguards. I'm going to explain a little bit about the computer-aided dispatch program they're using, talk about a linked data set that was created from the lifeguard activities data set, and then share some preliminary findings and our plans for the coming months. Okay, the study location. Newport Beach is in Southern California on the Pacific coast of the United States. Newport Beach is a city of about 70,000 residents. It has a large harbor with over 4,000 boats registered. There is 16 kilometers of coastline. It's a big sandy beach, a mild climate, frequented by tourists year-round. This video was recorded in January. I don't know what your January looked like, but this is what mine looks like. Home to world-famous surf break, The Wedge, big waves. It is a beach community. The Newport Beach lifeguards are organized as a branch of the fire service. This is something that's kind of common in Southern California, is that the lifeguard departments are organized under the fire department. All the lifeguards are professional lifeguards. There are no volunteers. The Newport Beach guards have 15 full-time permanent lifeguards. These are salaried employees of the city. There's 3 chiefs, 9 captains, and 3 lifeguard officers. The permanent lifeguards are EMTs, scuba certified, and kind of act as in a supervisory role over the about 230 seasonal lifeguards that augment those permanent lifeguards in the summertime. The seasonal lifeguards have, when they come in, about 120 hours of training. They're trained to a first responder, first aid level, and then many of them are also EMTs. The city of Newport Beach also runs a huge junior lifeguard program with about 1,300 kids and over 50 junior lifeguard instructors. So Newport Beach lifeguards have 2 headquarter buildings, over 38 lifeguard towers. 3 of those are bayfront, 13 frontline lifeguard patrol vehicles. They have 2 rescue watercrafts, and they have 3 Sea-Watch rescue boats, which are twin-screw 33-foot crystalliners designed to work in the surf, back up and pick up swimmers. We have a map of the city here. So the Newport Beach patrol area covers about 10 kilometers, and it's broken into 3 divisions. The blue dots here, you can see where the headquarter buildings are, and each of the red dots represents where a lifeguard tower is. Okay, the beginning of our story here. In 2015, the Newport Beach lifeguards started using a computer-aided dispatch system that is very similar to what law enforcement in the United States or fire service in the United States uses to run the operation. The way that this is different is that the dispatcher, who is a lifeguard who is going to be present on the beach running the operation from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. in the wintertime and 7 a.m. Usually till about 8 or 9 p.m. in the summertime. While operating the beach, they're now collecting this data and inputting it into the computer system. So they're collecting the nature of event, the time, the location, the unit, the kind of the position that's responding to that event, and then the employee. So there's over 82 event classifications, and in 2015 there was over 226,000 unique events. So this sort of data often lives in silos, but in the real world, they don't work in silos. So we kind of got our hands on this CAD data and decided to start linking it together to other environmental conditions. So the first thing we did was looked at weather. The weather data was collected, we used the public historical weather database that's collected from the nearest airport, the Santa Ana International Airport. And we looked at air temperature, humidity, wind direction, wind speed, precipitation, and the categorical variable of weather conditions. So scattered clouds, partly cloudy, sunny, 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 that sort of thing. So we have our CAD data, we have our weather data. Next, we started to link with ocean and tide data. So our ocean variables came from a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration wave rider buoy in Dana Point. And we're looking at wave height, dominant and average wave period in seconds, wave direction, and water temperature. And then we also have tide variables that were collected from the mouth of the Los Angeles Harbor and mathematically converted to the Balboa Pier, which is in Newport Beach. So with the tide variables, we have a timestamp and we have the water level. So we were able to calculate or kind of look at if it's an ebb incoming ebb outgoing or flood incoming tide. And on the West Coast in the United States, we have a mixed semi-diurnal tide, meaning that there are 2 highs and there are 2 lows per day, and each of these 4 tidal turns are at usually different water levels. What we were able to do in order to standardize our tide metric was look at a percent of high tide. So we have the green arrow and the purple arrow. The green arrow would be on an incoming tide at about a 0.5 water level, and then the purple arrow would be on an outgoing tide at maybe a 1 meter water level. But both of these arrows would be at 50% of high tide for that tidal range. All right, so we have CAD data, weather data, ocean data, and tide data. And the last thing we linked this together was with the lifeguard schedules. So we wanted to look at lifeguard coverage, and in order to kind of in the future run regression models, we needed to control for the number of lifeguards that were working on the beach. So the lifeguard schedules are used for payroll purposes, so they're assumed to be accurate. And we were able to take those schedules from the computer-aided dispatch, or from the lifeguard schedules, and link them all together. So what we ended up with was a data set that we'll quickly walk you through and explain kind of how the data is collected here. So this is a 5-minute snapshot from the 4th of July in 2015 at 3:51 p.m. to 3:55 p.m. So we can see there on the first line that Tower 22 had a public contact. So the way that this works is that somebody walked by the lifeguard and said, "Hey lifeguard, what time is it?" And she said, "Oh, it's 3:51 p.m. and then picked up the phone and said, "Public contact times 1." And the dispatcher logs that. So this is in real time, where now we have that sort of data collection compared to before, where they would call up the end of the day and say, "Hey, how many public contacts did you have?" And the person would say, 25. Okay? So as we go down, we can see that there was a preventative action to the left of Tower 61, and we keep going down. The TW, the tower wedge. So the wedge tower had 3 public contacts and an animal warning, and then there was a rescue and 2 preventative actions at Tower 71. So with each of these events, we have the latitude, the longitude, the unit that responded, the number of lifeguards that were currently working at that time. So there's 73 lifeguards working. Again, this is a 5-minute time range, so a lot of these next variables aren't going to change. But as we move across, we can look at the temperature, the humidity, the weather variables for each of these events. we can look at the ocean conditions, and then again, we can look at the tides. So again, this is a 5-minute period, so these things aren't changing very much, but we have a whole year of data to look at. Okay, so we have this data set. What now? Here's kind of a quick breakdown of what happened in 2015. I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom right-hand corner where we can see that these 6 event classification, or these 6 classifications, accounted for over 214,000 of the 226,000 events. So these 6 classifications account for about 95% of lifeguard activities. Preventative actions were far and away the most common nature of event and the most common activity for our lifeguards. And then we can see too here the breakdown of activity by month. Something that we were able to do with the location was start to build maps and build heat maps of what events are happening where. So this is a map of the city's rescue concentration. So for all the rescues, there's about 4,000 rescues in 2015. We can see that they're very concentrated right here in the Newport Point, which makes sense. There's a parking lot there, there's a pier there, there's lots of restaurants there. And then up into West Newport in the upper left-hand corner of the map, you can see that there is a lot of rescues as well. We can move forward with medical aid concentration. So surprisingly, a lot of our medical aids, and a medical aid was classified as any medical event where the person was either transported to the hospital in an ambulance or they were recommended to see a doctor and they self-transported. But most of our medical events were happening in that Division II area. This was closer to the Balboa Pier. A couple things to note here is that the medical aid, this event classification does not include stingrays, or else there would be kind of a heat spot over in Corona del Mar in another part of the map. And it's thought that there are a lot of medicals in this area because in this Division II area, it's a very steep beach, and at high tide, we experience a lot of musculoskeletal and broken necks sort of injuries in this area, just because it's a big kind of dumpy shore break wave that happens there. We can look at preventative actions. Again, this preventative action map kind of mirrors the rescue map, not too much surprising there. We have a little bit more concentration in other parts of the city, and then public contact concentration. So when we look at these maps together, we can kind of start to look at what's happening where and start to theorize and hypothesize as why. So something that was quite interesting when I first showed this to the Newport Beach lifeguards was we were looking at where the public contacts were happening, and if we can kind of use public contacts as a proxy for how concentrated the beach is, most of the public contacts are happening in the bottom right-hand corner at this beach called Corona del Mar, and it's packed there all the time. There's a huge parking lot. But when we look at where the rescues and the medical aids are happening, they're happening in other parts of the beach, so there must be something else going on here, which gives us reason to believe that conditions do matter, stuff that we mostly know as lifeguards. Okay, rescues by day of the week, not too much surprise here. Saturday and Sunday were our biggest days, followed by Monday and Friday. We think that the Monday rescues are largely due to the 2 holidays that we have during the summer, so kind of Labor Day and 4th of July holidays in 2015 also caused a Monday holiday. Rescues by time of day, so we kind of peaking around 2 o'clock, but this 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when we're experiencing most of our rescues. When we move on here, the blue bars here are a count of rescue coverage, or excuse me, lifeguard coverage, so how many lifeguards are working on the beach, and the red is the count of rescues. So you can very clearly see the defined season that Memorial Day, kind of at the end of end of May and the beginning of June, there's a big spike, a lot of lifeguards are working, and then right kind of in the middle of September, all the lifeguards go home. So what's interesting here to me is looking at, we have these times of really high rescue activity. When we look at the 2 circles here, the guards were pretty prepared for these times. I mean, there was a lot of rescues. This is an hourly count, so that spike on the upper right-hand corner means that there was an hour kind of there in late August, early September, where there was over 60 rescues in 1 hour, right? They were pretty prepared for it. They had a lot of people on duty. what's interesting to me is when we start to look at these other periods of these shoulder seasons where there are high rescue activities and there are very low, there's a low coverage level. So I'm looking forward to doing kind of some stratified analysis by season to see what are some of the other factors that are contributing to these shoulder season periods of high rescue activity. Okay, looking at some of the other variables, we have a box plot here, so just as a brief reminder, each kind of section of this plot is a quartile. So if we look at kind of the red 25th percentile to the 75th percentile, that means that the middle 50% of the data is in that blue box. So this allows us to look at kind of the spread of the data and then see where most of our rescues are happening in accordance with these variables. So this 24 to 30 degrees centigrade is kind of when we're making a lot of rescues. Water temperature, again, not too surprising. About 75% of the rescues are happening between 20 degrees and 24, 25 degrees. And then wave height, again, this 0.8 meters to 1.2 meters is when we're having a lot of rescues, although that there are quite a few rescues all the way up into the 1.6, 1.8 meters. Again, with the wave height, this is wave height at a buoy that's offshore. So surf, when it gets to the shore, is much bigger than that number. Okay, rescues and tides. This was something that was very interesting to me because when I was a lifeguard and I was sitting in my rookie class, I was told by my lifeguard instructor that most of our rescues are happening on an outgoing tide because that's when the rip currents are pulling strongest. I have believed that my entire career, as have most of the lifeguards that I work with. So this was rather surprising when we saw that there were more rescues that happened on a flood tide in the city. And the colors here break down the different divisions that I explained at the beginning of the presentation. So in every single division, there were more rescues on an incoming tide versus an outgoing tide. And this isn't a huge difference, but I was expecting the rescues to be much higher on an outgoing tide than an incoming tide. This is that percent of high tide, that standardized tide metric I explained it a few minutes ago. Basically, the box plot on the left is saying that we're rescuing people kind of at all points of the tide, low and high tide, although probably rescuing more people when it's a little bit lower tide. And this is consistent with a lot of the oceanographic literature that says rip currents are pulling faster, not necessarily because of the direction of the tide, but more because of the water level. The lower the water level, the faster the rip currents, regardless of whether the tide is coming in or the tide is going out. So again, this is only 1 year of data, and we're hoping that as we kind of progress along, that these figures will get a little bit more accurate. The last thing that we want to look at today is rescues by swell direction. So we were very interested, our Newport lifeguards were very interested in looking at, when there's a south swell, this part of the beach breaks differently than this part of the beach, and in the wintertime when there's a west swell, this part of the beach breaks differently than when in the other part of the beach. So we got it together. It's absolutely confounded by season. In the summertime in California, we mostly have south-southwest swells, so most of our rescues are happening during that time period. But when we broke it up and looked at heat maps kind of separated by the different tide or the different swell directions, there was really no difference visibly. There was no difference in what we were looking at. So we're hoping that as more time progresses and we have more rescues, we'll be able to start looking to see if there maybe is a difference, maybe there's not a difference, and then that can go back into the lifeguard's operational plan and knowledge of their beach. Okay, future plans. We're interested, like I said, interested in looking again at those shoulder seasons. I'm interested in looking at those times of low lifeguard coverage relative to the rescue rates. Hashtag collaboration. I'm interested, as many of you are, with working with people that are much smarter than me. So I'm really looking forward to working with some oceanographers to try and parse through some of these weather variables and some of these ocean variables in accordance with what we have with the lifeguard data. And then the big goal for I guess, the winter season coming up is to continue to describe this rescue profile and figure out the combination of variables that increase rescue rates, and then hopefully be able to build a predictive model to where we can look ahead for Saturday, and the temperature is going to be this, the water temperature is going to be this, the swell direction is this, it's a Saturday in June, we should expect this many rescues. So that's kind of the ultimate goal to try and do. Again, we only have 1 year of data, so as we move forward, hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit more with it. And then something that also is very important to me is dissemination and kind of working this data back into a feedback loop, and not only giving this to the lifeguard chiefs and the lifeguard supervisors, but figuring out a way to get this to those frontline tower guards through a revision of their training program, or presenting this information to them so they can learn a little bit more about their beach and hopefully improve their service. I talked a little bit today about the Newport Beach lifeguards and explained the computer-aided dispatch system that they're using. Described this linked data set that is pretty precisely showing us lifeguard activity with timestamps and locations. And then I shared a quick snippet of what the data set looked like and what we're hoping to do. I have to say thank you to the Newport Beach lifeguards for letting me play with their data. A big thanks to the lifeguard chief, Rob Williams, and battalion chief, Mike Halfide, my mentor and advisor, Dr. Koon, and Dr. Rohani Rabar from the University of Washington. Dr. Rob Brander helped me a lot kind of figure out some of those ocean variables, and then my friend in Newport Beach lifeguard, Alex Swan.